resources come opportunities.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah. And I see so many people shoestringing it, which I totally get and I've done. But it's so much harder. It's so much harder to feel easy, when you live and die by each financial decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, that'd be the one.
So when you were starting your coaching business or the business in general that you have,
yeah.
What were some of the hurdles getting started that you ran into? Just kind of getting that off the ground.
Sure, man. Good question. And I started by thinking I would start as an author. Mm-hmm. Your audience probably can't see it, but you can probably see that book on the shelf behind you.
Right.
That's my book of my life story, written using the same methodology I teach people to use now. Mm-hmm. And by every single account, it's not just me bragging, it's an excellent book. And I don't say that to brag. I say that because I had to learn the hard way that writing a great book doesn't mean jack. It just doesn't mean anything. That is quite possibly literary track ever be discovered, right? It went to international bestseller in 2 hours and still didn't make a ripple in the pond. So then I started to do research and say, well, how does an unknown guy get a book deal? Well, you have to build a platform. You have to build an audience. So the next question was, what's the best way to build an audience? First answer that came to me was podcasting. Okay. So I said, okay, I'll do a podcast. And it's a great way to build an audience. And it is definitely an endurance race and not a sprint, right? As I'm sure you know. But it is an amazing way to build an audience. I didn't have the patience for it, as it turned out. But in doing my podcast, the funniest thing happened. Steve Jobs talks about this connecting the dots from reverse, where you look back and you realize what unique sort of things you might have that you can put together to serve people. Mm-hmm. From the first episode, the first release, people started messaging me and saying, can you teach me how to sound like you? Right? Nothing to do with my content whatsoever. They said, can you teach me how to sound like you? And people would send me messages saying, you have the coolest podcast voice I've ever heard, and stuff like that. And then somebody finally said, what do you charge to teach me how to sound like you? And so that's when I had that connect the dots in reverse moment. And it occurred to me, I've trained as an actor. I've trained as a singer. I know how to develop voices. I know what it takes to be emotive, seductive, powerful, vulnerable, and how to do that with your voice. So the first guy ever, I was so green, I didn't even know what PayPal was. And so the guy says to me, I'm afraid my voice is just too boring. And I've got a podcast that's a big part of my business. Can you help me sound like you? And I said, yeah. What I'm going to need you to do is drive to my bank and deposit $397 in my bank account. And when you do that, that'll be for a month of coaching. And that was how I made my first sale. And since then, I've had $10,000 sales. And I got to tell you, that first $397 was the most exciting.
I bet.
But anyway, so it was a matter of looking backwards and saying, hold on, no, I can do this. And that's actually how I wound up teaching speaking. Mm-hmm. Because I had this book that I had no promotional budget for the book. I had very little promotional strategy. The thing took off like wildfire based on people telling their friends and buying it for their friends, which has to mean the storytelling is good. Right? Okay. I mean, that doesn't happen with business books. Right. So I kind of looked back and said, I can teach voice. I can teach body language. I can teach storytelling. I've done some public speaking in the past. So like through all of these things, I started to sort of, a clear offering started to come together. But as you can see, it was way different from what I thought it was going to be in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you decided to start going in this direction with it as a business, did you have a particular kind of a light bulb moment or an aha moment that said, this is what Manny is going to do?
Yeah, I did. My light bulb moment, if you want to call it that, was when the things that I was talking about and teaching people caught the attention of an influencer who I would say was much further along in his career than I was.
Right.
And he reached out to me and said, "Hey, look, I'm putting together this business course for how to make money public speaking. And I'm a good public speaker, but the content that you're talking about and you're teaching people is a great fit. And how would you like to talk about a partnership?" I said, "Great." We talked, and he said, "The first thing you have to do is take your content that you have now and organize it. You have to use either alliteration or acronyms so that it's super easy for people to wrap their head around." And in doing that, that was a real kind of a moment where, some information and some clarity and knowledge sort of came through me. So that was very powerful for me, actually. I was teaching what I was teaching, but it was very disorganized. And because it was disorganized, it was sort of hard to talk about, other than to say, "Yeah, I'll teach you how to be a good speaker." And then people would say, "Well, what does that mean? How are you going to do it?" And then I'd go off into these long, elaborate discussions and descriptions. Now I say I've got 3 main things I teach you. I teach you storytelling through an acronym called STORY. How easy is that? I teach you body language through an acronym called POISE. How easy is that? And I teach you vocal tonality and how important that is through an acronym called SPEAK. Mm-hmm. These simple, easy to remember acronyms, everything sort of dropped into place. I became better at teaching my content massively more clearly through that exercise. And so that's when it kind of all was like, now I can tell you what I do. Now I can tell you how I do it. Now I can start to talk about it, charge more for it, promise people outcomes. Yeah.
Okay. Now, besides what you're doing currently, is there some other sort of profession that you think that you would ever want to go into?
No, I dare not allow myself to think like that. Otherwise, I might go try to do it.
So that shiny object.
So the official answer is no.
Yeah, fair enough. What would you say your greatest character strength, though, is?
Good question. Yeah. Now I feel like it's a job interview. What would you say your biggest strength is? Well, I'd say I care too much. No, I'm just kidding. Let's see. I'm a very good teacher.
Okay.
And I mean very good. And I'm a very good teacher in a world of people who draw a false equivalency between having done a thing and assuming that they can then teach others to do it. Mm-hmm. In my professional industry, it's full of those people who have gotten on stage, who have booked stages, who have sold from the stage and assume that because they did that, they can teach you, only to find out that their training and their ability as teachers is utterly weak. Mm-hmm. But the problem is people don't find that out until $10,000 later.
Right. On the flip side of that, what would you say the greatest weakness would be then?
I'd say I care too much. No, just kidding. Yeah, I don't know, man. My greatest weakness, I suppose it's also a strength. I get very invested in the success of people. Oftentimes more so than they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, of course, can be heartbreaking.
When you're doing a brainstorming and getting your ideas, do you find that you go to a particular place to do that brainstorming? Maybe nature or the shower or what have you?
Not as such, but I really, really place a premium on being able to go on walks and get outside. Fortunately for me, I live in a very, very beautiful area, and we have walking trails all around our house. So it's super important, but I don't strategically use it to brainstorm. Okay. It's just changing environments is good for the soul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you're to describe what a day looks like in your business life for someone just starting, how would you describe that?
I would describe it as the absolute least amount of work I can possibly do, but with the highest leverage. Mm-hmm. So some days might look like 3 enrollment calls and that's it. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the highest leverage work I can do, is bringing new people in. Some days might look like today was back-to-back-to-back calls. All of them good and worthwhile, but it's exhausting for a guy like me. Paradoxically, even though I'm a speaker and a speaking coach, I'm very 6 hours straight. So yeah, I mean, there is no average day. That's kind of the life of an entrepreneur. But my goal, and I'm refining this all the time, is to take as much off my plate as possible and only do the things that absolutely move the needle the most.
Okay. And in winding out our time this afternoon, I have a trivia question, if you will. If you can mention something that most people do not know about Manny Wolfe, what would that be?
Well, I did write a book about my life, so. Let's see. One thing that most people don't know about me that's totally random is that I'm very much a lifetime fitness kind of junkie. For the rest of my life, I'll be into fitness. And I got to a point once where I could bench press over twice my body weight.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's very trivia based. Will do no one any good to know that whatsoever, but it is true. At one point, I weighed 180 pounds and 175 pounds, and I could bench press 365.
Goodness.
So how's that for useless trivia?
Exciting stuff, man. Exciting stuff.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, obviously they're going to want to be able to reach out to you and be able to contact you to take advantage of what you can bring to the table. How would they reach out?
Well, join my group. It's the one and only thing I suggest they do, and I've actually sent you the link to it in Messenger. But the customized link is tinyurl.com/Manny Group, all one word. tinyurl.com/Manny Group. Take you right there, just like that.
Perfect. Yeah, can't get any easier than that.
What's that?
Does it get any easier than that?
That's the goal, right? Yeah. I don't want you overthinking anything.
Well, Manny, I appreciate your time this afternoon, coming in and giving the listeners something